Good morning. Today's Daf is Daf Lamed Aleph. We're going to begin on Daf Lamed Amid Beis by V'chiyesh Lo Reshus L'Balabayis Litrim. The line starts with the Kitz. The last thing we explained from Rashi that it comes out that a balabas that has Paris, Meiser Rishon, that belongs to the Levi, he could now, l'chayra, it would imply that he could be Torem for the Levi, for the Kohen. So, frag the Gemara, v'chiyesh reshus l'balabayis litim trumas Meiser. Does the balabas have reshus now to be Torem the Meiser for the Kohen? L'chayra, the Meiser doesn't belong to him; it belongs to the Levi. So, how could he be Torem for the Levi? It's like being Torem shlei midas, and Torem shlei midas, like Rashi explains, is asur. So the Gemara says, yes. The Tana of the Raisa holds that a balabas could be mafresh trumas meiser, mina meiser for the Kohen. And Abba Elazar ben Gamlahi, who is the Raisa like Kishitas of Rabbi Elazar ben Gamla. The Tanya, we learned in the Raisa, Abba Elazar ben Gamla Imer, Abba Elazar ben Gamla says, the Torah says, in regards to the Levim, in regards to meiser, it says, v'nechshav lachem trumaschem, which means, and the gift you set apart, and then the pasuk says kadogan min hagerim, which means and the gift that you set apart, the prayer says v'nechshav lahem trumaschem shall be reckoned to you. And then the pasuk says again kadogan min hagerim, as though it were the grain of the threshing floor. What does that mean, trumaschem? Which means trumas meiser the levim min meiser is going to be considered as truma gedela that a yid was mafresh from his threshing floor. So he explains that b'shtei truma is hakosim medamer. The pasuk trumaschem is speaking about two types of trumas. Achas truma gedela. When it says dogam and geiren, that's one type of truma, which is truma gedela, which is given to the kohen. Achas trumas meiser, and trumaschem is teaching meiser rishon. Now, what does that mean? So he says kashem shetruma gedela tells ba'im. Just like when it comes to truma gedela, it's taken with estimation. In other words, benateda, there's no share of truma. Uv machshava, and you could take truma with machshava without being mafresh actually with your hands. Kach trumas meiser, and it tells ba'im. So too, when it comes to trumas meiser, there's no actual fixed amount benateda umachshava, and also with machshava. And just like the balabas has reshus to be tadim truma gedela from his peiros, kach yesh reshus the balabais litim trumas meiser. So too he has reshus to take meiser, even though it's not technically his. Okay, the next mission now we're going to continue discussing of this idea of cheskas kayomin, like hemed davar al cheskazeh. We're going to be continuing discussing this idea. So now the Mishnah says, Hameniach Peres, a person who set aside produce. Now he set aside produce with the understanding that Lies Mafresh Alein Truma Umaisus. He set aside produce with the understanding that he will separate Trumas and Meisers with it. In other words, when he has Tevel, and he wants to now render it fit by declaring that the Trumas and Meisers that must be separated will be from the produce that he has set aside for the purpose. So basically he takes a bunch of peiros, he sets it aside, he says these are going to be trumas and meisers, and then when he has actual peiros that he wants to take trumas and meisers, he just says, I'm going to use what I set aside and take off from there. So the halacha is, the Mishnah said, that or mois, or he wants to set aside money, also with understanding with understanding that he will separate and redeem Meiser Sheni with it. So the din is he could separate the truma or the money with the chazaka that the produce of the money are still there. In other words, he doesn't have to check each time, is the money still there, is the trumas and Meiser still there. He could separate it with that chazaka. Now, im avdu. Now, what if he discovers that they were taka lost? So then, so if they were lost, when were they lost? So he has to be concerned that the produce or the money that he set aside that was lost is from the time until the same time. In other words, for 24 hours, the Gemara is going to explain what me'es la'es means. Divrei Rebbe Elazar. Now, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Rabbi says, B'shloisha prakim boitkin es hayayin. One checks the wine. When you have wine that's set aside to be used for separating trumas and maasers for other wine, in other words, he goes and he wants to separate wine like peiros. So you have to make sure that the wine is taka wine and not vinegar. So he says, a person checks the wine 3 times during the year to make sure that it's taka fit for the purpose. Number 1, bekidum shel meitzei hachag, which is when the east wind, there's like the ruach tzveinis that blows at the end of Sukkot. So he has to check it then. Uba'atzoes smadar, and also when the blossom falls and the grape buds emerge and like they appear as a small cluster. Ubishas knisas mayim bebeser, and at the time when the water enters and fills the unripe grape. So since there is a change in weather at these times, one should check to ensure that the wine, like we said, it did not turn into vinegar. Okay, so now the Mishnah wants to know when we say Hamaniach Peiros Leis Mafresh Alein Trumas and Maasers, or Mois Leis Mafresh Alein Maaser Sheni, and then they got lost. So the Mishnah said we have to be Choishesh Me'es Leis. So Fred the Gemara Mai Leis Leis. What exactly does it mean Me'es Leis? Rabbi Yechon says Me'es Leis Shel Bedika. It means from the time it was checked and found to be lost until the same time of the day or the previous day. In other words, if one had used the produce to make it fit for other produce, so he has to be chayshish the last 24 hours, whatever was lost, that it was lost for the last 24 hours, and a person has to separate trumas and maasers from the produce again. So again, me'es la'es of the bedika. Elazar ben Antignes, he says that it's not me'es bedika, but me'es la'es shel ha'anocha. It's the time that it was set aside until the same time, the day after that it was set aside. In other words, he has to be chayshish about all the produce that he rendered it fit after the first 24-hour period from when he set aside the produce or the money had passed. Okay, now the Mishnah says, the Mishnah is going to ask on Rabbi Elazar b'Rebbe Yanai. Rabbi Elazar b'Rebbe Yanai, we said it's me'es la'es shel ha'anocha. So Fred the Gemara Tanah, we learned in our Mishnah, im avdu, if he discovers that they were lost, so Fred the Gemara Bishlam l'mandamar me'es la'es shel bedika. So Mela, according to the Mandamar, holds me'es la'es of the bedika. In other words, Rabbi Yechanan. So that makes a lot of sense. But according to the Mandam of Elazar ben Yanai, that means me'es la'es shel hanacha, hai me'es la'es, es ad me'es la'es mibayidli. So instead of saying, if he's correct that we look at the 24 hours from the hanacha, from the time that you're chayshish, from the time that he set aside the peiros, so then the Mishnah should have said that we should be chayshish going back until then, from the time it was set aside to the time of the following day. So the Gemara says, Taka Kasha, it's a question. Okay, so now we learned in the Mishnah, Im Avdu, Arizah Chayshish Me'es La'es, Divrei Rabbi Elazar. Now, Rabbi Elazar says, Chalukun alav dvarav shel Rabbi Elazar. Now this is the Rabbi Elazar, this is Rabbi Elazar. And then Rabbi Elazar, the Ameda, says that Chalukun alav chaveirav al divrei Rabbi Elazar. That Rabbi Elazar's colleagues disagree with him. Why? The time we learned in the Mishnah, mikveh shenimdad, famous din. Mikveh shenimdad v'nimtza chaser, in the case of a mikveh, that it was known to contain 40 sa, which was then measured, and you found that it was deficient. It had less than 40 sa in the mikveh. So the din is, call it tahira shenasu al gaba b'mafreya, all pure items that was rendered pure in it. So then, retroactively, it's considered bein b'rishus yachid, bein b'rishus harabim tmeis. So if you found, you measured the mikveh, so anything that was tabled in the mikveh, whether it's in rishus yachid or rishus harabim, are impure. So the Gemara says, Pshita the Chalukin. It's obvious that those who ascribe the Mishnah disagree with Rabbi Elazar. In other words, because what did Rabbi Elazar say? Rabbi Elazar says we only worry about the last 24 hours. And Rabbi Elazar the Amir says that the Chavedov are going to argue on Rabbi Elazar because from this Mishnah comes out that we say Lamafreya, everything's tummy, not only the last 24 hours. So the Gemara says no. Ma'al the Tema, you would think that Ma'al Lamafreya, when we say Lamafreya means Me'es Le'es, he teaches us that they disagree and they say everything is tummy, that immersed from the time that the mikveh had been last checked. So if let's say they checked it a week ago and there was 40 saw, and then they checked it again and there was less than 40 saw, so we say from the last time they checked till now, everything is rendered tummy. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says, B'shloisha prakim, that a person has to check the wine at 3 times during the year. One of the times we said is the east wind, when the Ruach Tzfeinis blows at the conclusion of Sukkot. Tana was taught, B'kidum shel matzei chag shel tkufa. It was checked when the east wind blows at the conclusion of Sukkot in the season of Tishrei. Now, which is like autumn, if the summer continues until Sukkot, then in the event of this unusual occurrence, one does not check the wine. So that's what he says. B'kidum shel matzei chag shel tkufa. It has to be when the east wind blows at the conclusion in the season of Tishrei, which is autumn. Tanya was taught in a brayso. Rabbi Yehuda says, "B'shleisha prakim moichen es hatfuah." 3 times during the year, a person sells the grain. When lefnei hazera, before the time of sowing, ubeshas hazera, during the time of the sowing, ubefreis haPesach, and before the Yom Tov of Pesach. B'shleisha prakim moichen es hayayin. 3 times a year, one sells the wine. Befreis haPesach, befreis hatzeres, befreis hachag. Before Pesach, before Sukkot, Shavuos, and before Sukkot. V'shemen, hatzeres ve'elach. And oil is sold from Shavuos and onwards. Why was this halacha, with regard to what halacha was it stated? In regards to partners. One partner may sell these products without the permission of the other, only at these times of the year. In other times of the year, he has to receive permission from the shutuf. Every day it's time to be sold. Okay. Then, having mentioned something about the Ruach Tzfeinis, now the Gemara gets into a little bit of a gadto. The Gemara says, "Vayihi kizreach hashemesh vayiman elikim ruach kodem charishis." It came to pass when the sun arose that Hashem prepared a charishis. Frag the Gemara, my charishis, Am Rabbi Yehuda b'shah shemin hasheves eiset tlam tlam bo. Which means, what is charishis? It means that a wind that plows, as at the time that the wind plows, it makes like furrows in the sea. Okay, so that's what it means, charishis. So Rabbi said to him, so he asked him, look at the next pasuk. It says, and the sun beat upon the head of Yoina, and he fainted. So, which is a question. It seems from the continuation of the pasuk that the wind was not extremely hot. It was not extremely hot, not strong. Which means at the time that it blows, it silences all the winds. So it calls charishis because all the other winds basically become quiet. Since only this wind was blowing, it became very hot. And this is what it says, you whose garments are hot when the earth is still by reason of the south wind. When are garments hot? In other words, when is the greatest heat? When the earth is still by reason of the south wind. As at the time that the southern wind blows, it silences all the wind. Okay, now the Gemara says a story of Rav Huna and Rav Chizda were sinning. Now Geniva passed by them. Geniva was a big Talmud Chacham, but he was not a good person. So Rav Huna and Rav Chizda were sitting, and Geniva passed by them. One said to the other, let us stand before him. Why the Bar Aryanu? He was a Talmud Chacham. So the other person said, you're going to stand before somebody who's a Baal Machlekes. And then in the meantime, this Geniva came to them and said to them, with what are you dealing with? What are you talking about? Amalei, they said to him that we're talking about ruchis, we're talking about winds. So Amalei, Gniva said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Chanan bar Abba Amar Rav. This is what Rav Chanan said in the name of Rav. Abba ruchis menashvis b'chol yom. There are 4 winds that blow each day. And the north wind blows together with each of them of the other 3. Now, Shemali Kain, if not so, and the northern wind would not blow, this Ruach Tzveinis would not blow, Ein ha'olam eskayim afilu sha'achas. The world would not survive even 1 hour. Ruach Dreimis kasher mekulan. And the south wind is harsher than all of them. V'yamali benetz ma'amida. And we're not for the angel called benetz, who stops it from blowing even harder. Macharebes kol ha'olam mekulam mipana. The entire world would be destroyed. Shenemar, like it says, Hami benoscha yaver neitz yifreis knaf of the teman. Does the hawk soar by the wisdom and stretch her wings towards the south? Gemara says another story. Rava and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak have a Yosvi. Rava and Rav Yitzchak were sitting. Have a cholav ozol Rav Nachman bar Yankiv, and Yaakov bar Nachman was passing by them. The Yosef b'gaharka the dahabis upris alea sarboli de karosi. So he was passing by them while sitting on a gilt carriage and with the green cloak and spread over him. Rava ran to him. Rav Nachman Yitzchak didn't go to him. Omar, he said, perhaps he's a member of the Reish Luso. Rava needs him. I don't need this guy. When he saw that it was Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, he went to him. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak uncovered his arm because it was very hot, and he said, Shadya Noshiv. The wind called Shadya is blowing. Amar Rava said, this is what Rav said, Isha Mapelas Boy, that about this wind, that a woman Nevach miscarries with this wind, Shmuel Amar Filu Margolis, Shabayam Markeves Boy, even like a pearl that's in the ocean, like decomposes from it. Rabbi Yechanan said that even the semen that it's in the woman's womb also becomes ice. Nachman bar Yitzchak said that, and the 3 of them derived from the same pasuk. Kihu ben Achim Yafri Yovei Kodem Ruach Hashem Midbar Elu V'Yovesh Mikayde, which means, for though he will be fruitful amongst the plants, an east wind shall come, the wind of Hashem coming up from the wilderness, and his spring shall become dry. So he said like this. Yeveshem Mikayre, what does it mean his spring shall become dry? Zum Mikayre shall Isha. This is where the woman's womb. V'yechrav ma'ayonai, and the fountain will become dry. This refers to the zera that is in the woman's womb. And who he shall spoil the treasure of all the precious kalim. This refers to the pearl of the ocean. Amar Rava says, Eidei Surahi, the Doki Kroi. This pasuk is from Surah, as they are very precise in psukim. Where it says, Mai kihu ben achim yafrich. What does it mean that though he be fruitful amongst the plants? So Amar Rava says that means Shutafa b'kaifina de mara, the handle and the hole of the mara, the hole. Rafia becomes loose. Rav Yosef says, Afilu siksa b'dafna, even the peg hammered into the wall, Rafia becomes loose. Rachav Yankov Amar, Afilu kanya b'kufta, Yankov says, even the reed woven into the basket, Rafia becomes loose. Hadam nalach kol get, Baruch Hashem, we have now concluded the 3rd perek of Gittin, and now we're going to begin, or I should say in a few hours, we're going to begin the perek Revi'ah Shaliach Get.